Thank you very much, Rebecca. Now we move to the next presentation by Paolo Vineis, who is the chair in environmental epidemiology at the Center for Environment and Health at the Imperial College in London. Paolo, please.
Thank you. I'm really grateful for being invited to this nice symposium. My point of view is slightly different because it is about, policy making and the interface of science and values. On the left, you can see a painting by Rubens, which is about human arrogance or hubris. It refers to a Greek myth, the myth of Phaeton, who put the earth on fire because of his arrogance, but this is more relevant to climate change, which is one of the distal determinants of the risk of pandemics. So I want to refer to this tradition we have inherited of independence of science, which is rooted in liberal societies. For example, the motto of the English Royal Society, which was founded in 1660, is nullius in verba, which means trust no one's word. And it was the expression of the members of the Royal Society to oppose to rules of authority. So the idea was that you have to root your claims and statements on evidence and possibly experiments just to oppose the rule of authority. But the situation now is pretty different in the sense that freedom and independence of science that were values at the time in what I defined the received view are threatened because we see intrusion of ideology and hidden agendas into the practice of science. So the reality today is that ideology often drives statements and decisions. This is particularly true in the United States, but also in Italy and in other countries. I must say that scientists have largely stayed away from this. There are precedents in history, there are many. This is an example of Hamburg. Well, I'm a physician and an epidemiologist. I'm not a historian, so I apologize for imperfection in what I'm saying. But there was an epidemic in Hamburg, just as an example, in 1892, where 8,600 people died. And the authorities didn't want to take any action because it threatened the economic liberty and prosperity. Partly because the ruling class was made of merchants. There was a very important harbor in Hamburg. And so the situation was addressed really only when Koch was sent by the emperor. So this is one of the many examples of health economic conflicts and reluctance by the ruling class or the population to take measures. Another example is the International Commission for the Control of Cholera in 1869, when they ordered a quarantine to British ships in the Suez Canal, and the British refused, claiming that it was a violation of the Free Trade Act, and the cholera was an excuse to block the British trades. So there have been episodes of conflict or trade-off sometimes between economic goals and health. More recently, we have seen the use of soft power, like the famous General Chen Wei in China, who claimed that the vaccine development in China was a success of Chinese technology. So this was very embodied in the sense of proud of the Chinese state. Now, I tried, and I apologize for naivete, in a way, to understand the ideological roots of current policies and the general attitude of politicians and a big share of the population in certain countries. So what I identified is a first set of roots, which is in ultra-liberalism, that is minimizing the role of the state. And there is a tradition in the United States, like Robert Nozick, a philosopher who coined this word minarchy, meaning minimum state, as opposed to the other more progressive liberal tradition expressed, for example, by Rawls. So ultraliberalism is one route. And people have also said that since the state is not in charge and the individual is in charge of wealth and health, this is a kind of new social Darwinism. This was a paper in The Guardian saying that we are in the MAGA's era of soft eugenics. Let the weak get sick and help the clever breed. But I find a lot of contradictions in the Trump government. For example, if you look at the website of MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, it says things that resonate with many, say, alternative movements, also in Europe, in favor of holistic health. The idea is natural healing, getting rid of chemicals in the environment. And this is really at odds with other branches of the US administration, like EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, where they are doing exactly the opposite. They're allowing the industries to keep polluting chemicals in the environment. So it is a kind of mixed bag of points of view which overall contribute to, however, to populism. This is based on my personal experience. I think that for policy making, science is necessary, but it is not sufficient. Policy makers should use scientific evidence, but also make their values explicit. I found at the time of COVID-19 some positive aspects of the pandemic within the global disaster, because it led, this is based essentially on what I have seen in Italy and the UK, a rediscovery of the value of public health care and the state. It prioritized health over the economy with many contradictions. It briefly led to a reduction in consumption and pollution, and it contradicted the conservative motto, which is attributed to Thatcher, but it seems that Thatcher never said it, according to which society doesn't exist, only individuals count. Well, COVID was a clear example of the fact that society exists. And, well, all these values were for a moment prominent in society, but now they are widely questioned in Western societies, starting with the United States 6 years on, and we have to reflect on the reasons, the roots of these changes. Well, one lesson I got from COVID was humility. We need to be humble, because research is going slowly, or very rapidly, like in the case of vaccines. But in any case, we cannot exactly predict what will happen tomorrow or in a week, which is what the press wants, the public wants. So I thought of Plato's cave, the myth of a cave, and I thought that everyone, including scientists, look at shadows which are projected on the wall of the cave by a fire, and they try to infer which kind of objects people carry on their heads outside the cave. So we do not have a direct access to reality, and this should be made clear with the public. We are constantly building our tools and our knowledge. So in terms of humility and awareness, well, years ago in 2020, together with other people, mainly philosophers, we wrote a manifesto about being humble, for example, in the use of models. For example, politicians have used models of epidemics as if they project certainties. And we said that modelers should not be permitted to project more certainty than their models deserve, but politicians should not be allowed to offload accountability to models of their choosing. Yeah, and we well, identified several features of this humility and humble attitude. Talking about preparedness, as you see, I'm referring to humanities and social sciences, Plato and Rubens and so on. In fact, I have coordinated a working group for the National Academy of Sciences in Italy about preparedness. This was published 2 years ago. And we put much emphasis on social sciences and humanities, because we believe that without the social sciences we are not able to address many of the problems we are observing and that have been described before. So we need a new alliance between natural and social sciences. From a planetary point of view, about issues like vulnerability, equity, communication, ethics, and so on. I like to refer to this particular person, Philippe Korilski, a French biologist who has written very nice contributions and this particular book on science and democracy, because his idea is really original. He says that democracy needs robustness, which is akin to what we call the allostatic load in biology. Robustness means that a democracy is a democracy if it is able to address crisis. And robustness is a property of complex systems, and equality is a component of robustness and the ability to address crisis. And Korilski specifically refers to the assault on the Capitol Hill, saying that an unjust society that does not respond adequately to stressors is a weak democracy. So stressor is the key, one of the key words, and the other key word is robustness. And clearly today, this is my opinion, the US is not a robust democracy. Others may be more robust, but we are going probably in the wrong direction. And I want also to mention this famous book by Case and Deaton about death of despair and the future of capitalism, which is an example of a lack of robustness and its huge consequences, really huge consequences. Thank you.